Jason Voorhees was born on June 13, 1946 in Crystal Lake to his mother Pamela Voorhees. When he was just 11 years old, he fell into the lake at Camp Crystal Lake and supposedly drowned. But in 1979, Jason returns to avenge his mother's death for the events of the first film. So the question is, did Jason actually drown and return as some sort of supernatural being? Or did he actually survive the lake on that Friday the 13th day in 1957? The story goes that on September 13, 1957, Jason fell into the lake of Camp Crystal Lake by either A, other bullies at the camp shoving Jason into the lake as some sort of prank, or Jason was left unattended by the counselors because they were having sex or just straight up not paying attention, aka these counselors were super faded. But anyways, their carelessness happened while Jason wandered into the lake and they didn't notice in time. The next year, Pamela Voorhees returned to the camp for payback and killed 2 counselors. The camp stayed open, so she returned every year from then on and made sure people were killed until they finally closed down Camp Crystal Lake. In 1979, the camp was opened once again by Steve Christie, and Pamela Voorhees struck again, and that is when we get our first film. So I'll be going over the 2 sides and the different possibilities of what happened to Jason Voorhees, as well as some fan theories, before I finally give my 2 cents on what I think happened to our big sexy man Jason. So first, let's talk about the original idea, which is that Jason drowned in the lake. In the first Friday the 13th film, we hear Enos, the pervy truck driver, mention that a child drowned in the lake in 1957. Also, we hear Pamela herself refer to her drowned son in the 3rd act of the movie. These 2 scenes alone from the first film paint the picture that everyone in the world except for Jason Voorhees himself was under the impression that Jason had actually drowned in 1957. But it is not just in the original film when Jason is portrayed as if he had drowned, because in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, we see Tommy Jarvis dig up a dead Jason to finish him off once and for all, but once he sticks the metal post in him, it is struck by lightning and Jason is resurrected. In this film, which is arguably the best film in the franchise, by the way, if you know what I'm saying. But anyways, here, this supports the idea that Jason cannot die and that he actually was dead from drowning before dying once again in Part 4 and then being resurrected here, showing that he is some type of supernatural being. And this specific movie is important to note because it ties to some theories that we will be talking about later on. In Friday the 13th Part 7, New Blood, Jason is freed from his chains at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake by being tickled in his brain by Tina Shepard by means of telekinesis or some sort of supernatural brain connection. Or maybe she woke up Jason by giving him some brain. Damn, the shit you find on Reddit fanfiction, man. Anyways, this obviously implies that Jason remained dormant underwater, reinforcing the idea of his supernatural existence when he is suddenly awoken and freed by means of her imagination. Reinforcing the idea of his supernatural existence when he is suddenly awoken and freed by means of her imagination. In Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, Jason is resurrected by an underwater electrical cable, suggesting that his existence is sustained through supernatural means, as he can be revived by external forces despite his previous deaths. And to be fair with this one, I mean, Tina, this is your fault because first you freed Jason from chains at the bottom of the lake by simply thinking about him. So what is your big plan to get rid of him once and for all? Oh yeah, just have your dead father chain him back to the bottom where he just came from. Like, come on, we learned chains aren't gonna hold back Jason for long. But anyways, Jason is toxic wasted and seems to die in the sewer at the end of this film. So it's kind of wild that Jason is just chilling in the next film, but never mind. That's because in Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, we see Jason chasing a woman, trying to kill her when he is ambushed by the entire SWAT team, bro. This dude gets blown down by like 40 dudes. Okay, pause. I'm sorry about that. But he is killed for a while until the coroner takes a bite out of Jason's heart and his spirit is passed on through multiple people, which definitely suggests supernatural elements for Jason and that he can never really die. Well, that is until someone in his family stabs him with the special sword. Damn it, never mind. This one also has some fan theories behind it, so keep that in mind for later. Now in Jason X, we just get all wild and shit because obviously Jason is not human here, as it's set in the future and Jason's body is discovered and thawed, so His ability to survive cryogenic freezing and regeneration into a more powerful and indestructible Uber Jason form indicates a supernatural resilience, and that's obviously beyond human capabilities for sure. And this dude is literally sent into space and gets disintegrated, but he's obviously still alive after the ending as his body falls into the water. And we hear that good old ki. So in Freddy vs. Jason, Freddy resurrects Jason once again to instill fear in the residents of Springwood, and this resurrection further supports the notion that Jason operates beyond natural laws, existing as a supernatural force once again. I mean, this dude just keeps getting resurrected, man. This is like the 10th time at this point. But now let's go over the other side, which is that Jason never actually died, and he did not drown, but instead he survived and lived in a shack near Camp Crystal Lake. So in Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason returns and slaughters counselors as revenge for his mother's death. But in this film, we see that he has been living out of a shack in the woods with his mother's belongings in there. This suggests that Jason did indeed survive that day in 1957 and has been scavenging in the woods all these years later until he saw his mom get decapitated, which naturally made him avenge her. Next, in Friday the 13th Part 3, Jason sustains injuries and reacts to pain, indicating he is human. His need to steal food and clothing implies he has been surviving off the land, supporting the theory of his prolonged survival in the wilderness. Also, he's able to be taken down at the end of this film, but that doesn't last for long, because in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, after being presumed dead after Part 3, Jason's body is taken into a morgue where he regains consciousness, but this time without any supernatural invention. This scene implies that Jason is a living human with just remarkable resilience, and he's just a strong, beautiful body, man, you know what I'm saying? But later in the film, he is actually killed, or I think so, by Tommy Jarvis when he disguises himself as a kid version of Jason, so old buddy will take it easy on them. Now, in Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, or as I like to call it, Silly Blue Jason Mask movie, Jason is still dead, and this is actually the only other movie other than the original film that doesn't feature Jason Voorhees at all. In fact, it has a totally different killer named Roy Burns, who is just a boring paramedic who imitates Jason and kills people before he is ultimately killed by being stabbed and falling on some sort of, what are those, farm spike thingies? Okay, now the reboot is totally unrelated from the other films, but I think it is still important to mention that in Friday the 13th, the 2009 reboot, Jason's backstory is seemingly ignored, but he looks to have died at the end and no further movies have been made. And I know it's some copyright stuff that they're dealing with, but he also seems to have more of a human aspect and look to him in this film. And he also hides out near Camp Crystal Lake. So there was some evidence for both sides, and before making our final decision, let's take a look at some of the most popular fan theories. So first, we have the theory that Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother, brought him back to life after he drowned with the Necronomicon from Evil Dead, because in Jason Goes to Hell, it is seen and it suggests that Pamela may have used some dark magic to resurrect Jason after his drowning, and that explains his supernatural abilities in the later films. And if you don't know what the Necronomicon is, well, it's an ancient and cursed book that contains demonic incantations and rituals, essentially acting as a guide to summon and control evil forces, often referred to as Deadites. So essentially, this theory states that Pamela resurrected Jason using this book, and that means Jason is a Deadite or an evil force. This makes sense in some ways, with Jason coming back to life and being evil, but the Deadite idea doesn't make much sense since the rest of the franchise, other than Jason Goes to Hell, because that is the only movie in which he actually possessed people in. Another theory is that Jason simply did survive his supposed drowning and lived off-grid near Camp Crystal Lake for years, unknown to the rest of the world, until he saw his mother die and came out of hiding to avenge her. But he actually did die at the hands of Tommy Jarvis in the final chapter, and then resurrected by that same Tommy Jarvis in Jason Lives. But once he was brought back to life, it was by supernatural means, and he was no longer human for the rest of the franchise, which makes sense accounting for his human traits in the earlier films and his undead characteristics thereafter. And while you might be wondering, what's the most logical answer and what do I think? Well, quite simply, I believe the second theory. I believe Jason did survive his drowning, but was then killed by Tommy and then resurrected by Tommy and was supernatural for the rest of his time after his resurrection. It makes sense to me, and I like that theory since it actually ties the franchise together and brings some answers to us fans, which was something that the Friday the 13th franchise failed to do as a whole. But what do I know? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. Did Jason drown or did he not? Let me know. Please drop a like and hit that subscribe button, or Uber Jason will be under your bed tonight. Thank y'all so much for watching and have a blessed day. Peace.